friends watching at home are going to think I'm insane. Insane. But that's okay. Today is one of my favorite religion stories. I live for this story because you've heard it before, but you haven't heard all of it. Are you ready? So we're going to start. Keep your Bibles closed. Just be still for a minute. Just enjoy the stories. Okay? Can you all hear me okay? I feel very quiet today. Is that better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's a little better, yeah. My volume's up a little bit. All right. So this story is really a cool one. And I'll write the book of the Bible up in a minute, but it comes from 1 Samuel. And the reason that is 1 Samuel, the number 1 will come before the rest of the books because there's more than 1 Samuel. So when you look, there are 2 books of Samuel. Where we are too right now is we're in the historical books of the Bible. Remember the first part of Genesis was not, the first 11 chapters of Genesis, Gabby, was not an attempt to tell us history. Because people didn't have written history then. It was an attempt to explain God's love and presence with the world. So that's why it has things like cities that you didn't see them being developed, and we talked about this. Then you get to Exodus and the other books that are much more historically accurate. Where we are now, George, these are books that people can follow back and trace through history. The people in these books existed. They're real. So, I do want to read you a little bit about the beginning of Samuel. And this is in your Bible at the very beginning. Okay, have it your way. But don't say I didn't warn you. Perhaps you've heard these words somewhere along the line. This is the message God gives the people through Samuel, the last of the judges. So the judges were the people who were kind of in charge of the Israelites. They were, Kellen, they were like mayors or governors. But the people of Israel said, we want a king. And God said, no, you don't. You don't want a king. No good comes from that. You're doing really well with the judges. Stick with what's good. And the people said, we want a king. And God said, I don't think you want a king. And the people said, we want a king. So that brings us to this part. They wanted to be like every other nation, so God agrees, which starts a new chapter, if you will, in Israel's history. The 2 books of Samuel, which actually were originally one long book, but then they split it, tell the story of the time of the change in leadership from the judges, the military rulers of Israel, to the kings. Which, anytime there's a change in leadership, it brings up a whole new set of challenges and problems. George, I'm over here. The Israelites and their kings want to remember that the true king of Israel is God. The book was probably compiled using ancient court records and stories of heroes. It was written to tell the story of the beginning of the monarchy, the kings in Israel. So that's the purpose, to tell how kings came to be. It covers the time from about 1040 to 1000 BC. Remember, when we're counting BC, we're counting down to that 0. So the bigger the number, the further away it happened. The smaller the number, the closer it was to when Jesus was born. Jesus is from the line of David and often compared to David. So here are some themes of the book of Samuel. And all of this isn't going on your slide. This is more information than what you need to put on your slide, but it's also information that Ms. Russell wants you to know for next year. Does that make sense? And if you can't remember it, you need to know where to find it. And remember that you've heard it before. Important themes. Faithfulness to God leads to success. Disobedience leads to disaster. Fair. Israel's kings are chosen by God and are responsible for God's interests. The person God chooses is is often not the person we would choose. So those are the themes that you'll see through these two books of Samuel. We're not reading all of Samuel. We're reading little parts of it. So the first part that we're reading is chapter 3. And don't open yet. I'll let you open your book and find it in a little bit. Chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. So Samuel was little. And a lot of times when kids were little, and they were like important, and the family said they were going to make a commitment to God, they would go and do like almost like a boarding school experience, but stay with people who were very wise. Because schools then were very different too. So in those days when the boy Samuel was serving the Lord under the direction of Eli, there were very few messages from the Lord, and the visions of him were quite rare. One night, Eli, who was now almost blind, was sleeping in his own room. Samuel was sleeping in the sanctuary where the sacred covenant box was. Who knows what was kept in the sacred covenant box? Sacred covenant. What covenant did we hear about yesterday?
Abraham?
Nope. What covenant did you hear about all in 4th grade?
God's covenant?
Well, yeah, covenants of promise with God.
Moses?
Moses. What did Moses get that could be kept in a box?
A coat?
No, that was Joseph.
Yeah, Ten Commandments?
The 10 Commandments. The box of the covenant was where the 10 Commandments were kept. So everybody sitting up paying attention. Do you have your attention now? We've got the box of the covenant. The 10 Commandments are in a box. And Samuel is sleeping in the room with the 10 Commandments. Can you even imagine how cool that would be? He's there with the actual 10 Commandments that God handed from the mountain. Samuel was sleeping in the sanctuary where the sacred covenant box was. Before dawn, while the lamp was still burning, the Lord called to Samuel. He answered, "Yes, sir," and ran to Eli and said, "You called me. Here I am." But Eli answered, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." So Samuel went back to bed. The Lord called Samuel again. The boy did not know it was the Lord because the Lord had never spoken to him. So he got up and went to Eli and said, "You called me, and here I am." But Eli answered, "My son, I didn't call you. Go back to bed." The Lord called to Samuel a third time. He got up and went to Eli and said, "You called me, and here I am." Then Eli realized it was the Lord who was calling the boy. So he said to him, "Go back to the bed, and if he calls you again, say, 'Speak, Lord, your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went back to bed. The Lord came and stood there and called to him as he had before, "Samuel! Samuel!" Samuel answered, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." The Lord said to him, "Someday I'm going to do something to the people of Israel that is so terrible everyone who hears of it will be stunned. On that day I will carry out all my threats against Eli's family from beginning to end. I've already told him that I'm going to punish his family forever because his son spoke evil things against me." Eli knew they were doing this, but he did not stop them. So I solemnly declare to the family that no sacrifice or offering will ever be able to remove the consequence of this terrible sin. Samuel stayed in bed until morning, then got up and opened the door to the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli about his vision. Eli called him, "Samuel, my boy?" "Yes, sir," answered Samuel. "What did the Lord tell you?" Eli asked. "Don't keep anything from me. God will punish you severely if you don't tell me everything he said." So Samuel told him everything. He did not keep anything back. Eli said, "He is the Lord. He will do whatever seems best to him." As Samuel grew, the Lord was with him and made true everything that Samuel said. So all the people of Israel, from one end of the country to the other, knew that Samuel was indeed a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to reveal himself at Shiloh, where he appeared to Samuel and had spoken to him. And when Samuel spoke, all Israel listened. Now, picture yourselves. This is a great story to picture for a moment. Have you all ever woken up in the middle of the night? Do you feel like completely aware? You're kind of disoriented. Like you're not sure what's going on. Have you had that moment where you're like, what? Did I hear a noise? So poor Samuel is in bed asleep. How many of you have ever gone in and tried to wake up your adult at home, your grown-up, your parents, your mom, your dad, your grandma, whoever it is that you're staying with, to tell them that you need something, and your mom or dad is like, what? Just go to bed. Have you had that experience?
Yes.
Go to bed. So put yourself here. Samuel goes into Eli and he's like, you called me? And Eli, who was asleep, is like, for real, go to sleep. You're dreaming. Go back to bed. Go. It happens again. How many of you have woken up your families more than one time in the middle of the night? Does it get more pleasant or less pleasant as time goes on? Less pleasant as time goes on. That's usually, as a person who's being woken up now, that's usually how it works. Like, just go. What is wrong with you? I told you to go to bed. You're not hearing anything. Everything is fine. Go to sleep. Right? So that's the first two times. Because Eli is like, just go to bed. Come on, man, I'm tired. Go to bed. But then he realizes, wait a minute. This has happened more than one time. Hold on. God is speaking to him. And that's a big deal. So he tells Samuel what to say to God and how to answer God. Because wouldn't that be kind of crazy too? To know that God was speaking to you, and have to think of what to say and how to answer. Now the history between God and Eli, that's a whole long problem. God was obviously not pleased with Eli for the way his children had grown up. But here's what's cool about this story. Are you ready? Did God try one time? Samuel. And Samuel didn't get it, so God's like, all right, on to the next guy. It's cool. He didn't hear me today. It's fine. He didn't hear me this time. It's fine. No. Bible flat. God kept trying. And God waited until Samuel understood. But then God didn't give him like a baby message. Like, tell everybody I love them. God waited until Samuel was ready to hear this message. But then he gave him a real message. And it wasn't a pleasant message. But God shared it with him. And you know what Eli did? Eli had choices here too. Because he could have said, you know what, I don't want to hear it. I already know God's mad at me, I don't want to hear it. Couldn't he have done that? Would you have wanted to hear a bad message? Kelly, would you have wanted to hear a bad message? Vanessa, what about you, darling? Probably not, right? So even though Eli knew God was mad at him, he still said, all right, God's in charge. And whatever happens, God is in charge. And I think this story has a lot of really cool aspects of it. Because when God talks to you, and he talks to all of us during our life in different ways, he's not going to just say, Lauren. Oh, well, she wasn't listening. It's cool. I'm going to start talking to Giada and Sasha now because Lauren missed it. No more turns for you. God wants you to hear him, so he will keep talking to you until you're ready to listen. But the other really cool thing is that Samuel had people around him to help him be ready to listen. It wasn't just Samuel. He had people there to advise him and help him. All right, our next story, are you ready? This is awesome. We skipped to chapter 16. Let me find it. Okay. So the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you go over grieving Saul? I've rejected him as king of Israel. So basically Samuel, now he's recognized as being somebody who speaks for God. A prophet, one who speaks for God. Our heads are up. We're paying attention because this gets really good. Samuel had to go, God sent Samuel out to look for who the next king would be. Who would be anointed king. So he's out. Samuel saw Jesse's son, Eliab, and said to him, this man is standing here in the Lord's presence. Samuel did. The Lord answered, take a calf with you and offer what you are there to offer sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will tell you what to do. You will anoint a king as the man I tell you to. So we've got now Jesse from the Jesse tree. We're getting awfully close to Jesus' family here. Are you ready? This is cool stuff. Samuel did what the Lord told him to and went to Bethlehem. Ooh, are we starting to hear familiar cities? We're getting there. Where the city leaders came trembling to meet him and asked, is this a peaceful visit, seer? Yes, I've come to offer a sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me. He also told Jesse and his sons to purify themselves, and he invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Jesse's son Eliab and said to himself, "This man standing here in the Lord's presence is surely the one he has chosen." But the Lord said to him, "Pay no attention to how tall and handsome he is. I have rejected him, because I do not judge as people judge. They look on the outward appearance, but I look at the heart." Then Jesse called to his son Abner and brought him to Samuel. But Samuel said, "No, the Lord hasn't chosen him either." So before this, Samuel had gone to Jesse and said, "The Lord has chosen one of your sons to be anointed." So now what's happening is that Jesse is presenting each of his children. Right, Vanessa? Right, Charlie? Jesse is bringing each of his children. So Samuel said no to 2. Then he answered, "Do you have any more sons?" Jesse answered, "They're still the youngest, but he's out taking care of the sheep." "Tell him to come here," Samuel said. "We won't offer the sacrifices until he comes." So Jesse sent for him. He was a handsome, healthy young man, and his eyes sparkled. The Lord said to Samuel, "This is the one, anoint him." Samuel took the olive oil and anointed David in front of his brothers. Immediately the Spirit of the Lord took control of David and went with him from that day on. So we've got David, who's a shepherd. He takes care of sheep. That's his job. And now he's been anointed. This is a very big deal. Are you ready? So now, during this time, wars happened a little differently. People come out and challenge each other to fight. And soldiers, wars could take a very long time. Even in the Civil War and the American Revolution, the battles took a very long time. People used to, here in American history, people used to go have picnics to watch the battle. It's not what we think of as modern warfare. So that's hard to understand. You can do more research on it, but it's not the same as modern warfare now. So, a man named Goliath, the Philistines are ready to challenge the Israelites. Israelites, David. Philistines have Goliath. You've heard this story before, but I'm going to take it to the next level. David and Goliath. This is the slingshot story. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Pay attention, because this is the version that's not in your little children's Bibles that you got for your first communion. We're getting older now. You can handle more of the facts. Are you ready? Everybody sing up straight, because this is my favorite story in the Bible. Well, my favorite story to retell to 5th graders in the Bible. Are you ready? Goliath. A man named Goliath from the city of Gath came out from the Philistine camp to challenge the Israelites. He was over 9 feet tall and wore bronze armor that weighed about 125 pounds and a bronze helmet. His legs were protected by bronze armor, and he carried a bronze javelin slung over his shoulder. His spear was as thick as the bar in a weaver's loom, and an iron head weighed about 15 pounds. A soldier walked in front of him carrying his shield. Goliath stood and shouted at the Israelites, "What are you doing there, lined up for battle? I'm a Philistine, you slaves of Saul. Choose one of your men to fight me. If he wins and kills me, we will be your slaves. But if I win and kill him, you will be our slaves. Here and now I challenge the Israelite army. I dare you to pick someone to fight me." Yes?
We watched the VeggieTales on this.
Yep.
Yeah, we did.
But the VeggieTales stops. Do you want to hear the end? And the real parts? So the VeggieTales did include the taunting, right? The back and forth jeering and taunting. When Saul and his men heard this, they were terrified. David was the son of Jesse, who is an Ephraim from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons at the time Saul was king, who was already a very old man. His 3 oldest sons had gone with Saul to war. The oldest was Eliab, the next was Amabed, and the third was Shammah. David was the youngest son. And when the 3 oldest brothers stayed with Saul, David would go back to Bethlehem from time to time to take care of his father's sheep. All right, so you've got the 3 oldest brothers at battle. And David is still basically living at home taking care of his father's sheep. How many of you have brothers that are older than you? Yeah. Older brothers. Are they always the kindest? No. They can really tease you and bother you sometimes, right? Keep that perspective in mind. Are you ready? Goliath challenged the Israelites every morning and every evening for 40 days, which again in the Bible means a long time. One day Jesse said to David, take a half of this, go take some food up to your brothers. Go bring your brothers some food. They've been at this war camp for a while, bring them some food. David got up early next morning, left someone in charge of the sheep, took the food, and went as Jesse had told him to. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelites were going out to their battle line, shouting the war cry. The Philistine and Israelite army took position for battle, facing each other. David left the food with the officer in charge of the supplies, ran to the battle line, went to his brothers, asked how they were getting along. As he was talking to them, Goliath came forward and challenged the Israelites as he had done before. And David heard him. When the Israelites saw Goliath, they ran away in terror. Look at him, they said to each other. Listen to his challenges. King Saul has promised to give a big reward to the man who kills him. The king will also give him his daughter to marry, and he will not require his father's family to pay taxes. So now the king is like, somebody please just defeat him. Okay, because during that time you didn't marry for love, just what it was. So the king said, you can marry my daughter. Your family won't have to pay taxes. Come on, you're royalty and you're going to keep your money. Somebody fight him. And nobody's doing this. Because he's 9 feet tall and wearing armor that weighs hundreds of pounds. David asked the men who were near him, what will the man get who kills this Philistine and frees Israel from this disgrace? After all, who is this heathen Philistine to defy the army of the living God? They told him what would be done for the man who killed Goliath. Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard David talking to the men. He became angry with David and said, what are you doing here? He's taking care of those sheep of yours out in the wilderness. You smart aleck. You just came to watch the fighting. Okay, going back to the big brother thing, right? David's older brother's like, why are you even here? Go away. Go back to your own friends. Have you had that experience before? Yeah. Now what have I done, David asked. Can't I even ask a question? How many times, younger siblings, have you said something along those lines? Can't I just ask a question? Come on. He turned to another man and asked the same question. Every time he asked, he got the same answer. Some men heard what David said, and they told Saul, who sent for him. Your Majesty, David said to Saul, Your Majesty, no one should be afraid of this Philistine. I will go and fight him. No, answered Saul. How can you go fight him? You're just a boy. He's been a soldier all his life. Your Majesty, David said, and this is important because we talk about David being a shepherd. But what we don't keep in mind is that shepherds during this time, like we think shepherds now where the fields are like flat and green and you just take care of sheep. Shepherds during this time were shepherds in mountains. So listen to what David says prepared him. Are you ready to pay attention? Your Majesty, David said, I take care of my father's sheep. Anytime a lion or a bear carries off a lamb, I go after it, attack it, and rescue the lamb. And if the lion or bear turns on me, I grab it by the throat and beat it to death. I have killed lions and bears. I'll do the same to this heathen Philistine who has defied the army of the living God. The Lord saved me from lions and bears. He'll save me from this Philistine. All right, Saul answered. Go and the Lord be with you. He gave his own armor to David for him to wear, a bronze helmet which he put on David's head, and a coat of armor. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor and tried to walk, but he couldn't because he wasn't used to wearing them. So the king gives him all this protective gear, right? And much like this giant tinsel thing that just keeps falling all over and is uncomfortable, the armor wasn't working for him, and he knew he couldn't fight with that. So he said, I can't fight with all this. I'm not used to it, so he took it all off. He took the shepherd's stick and picked up 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in his bag. With this sling ready, he went to meet Goliath. Now this is the story you all know, right? David goes out to meet Goliath. He's got 5 little stones. Keep listening. I promise the story does not disappoint. The Philistine started walking toward David with his shield bearer coming in front of him. He kept coming closer. When he got a good look at David, he was filled with scorn for him because he was just a nice, good-looking boy. He said to David, what's that stick for? Do you think I'm a dog? And he called down curses up from his God on David. Come on, he said, challenging David. I will give your body to the birds and animals to eat. So in this time, the worst thing you could do for somebody was not bury a body. That was like a huge insult to them and to their family. Right, Gabby? So what Goliath is saying is, not only am I going to kill you, but I'm not even going to let your family bury your body. So now insult level like going up. A lot of you said A Christmas Story is your favorite movie. We're going from like, I dare you. I double dog dare you. We're getting really close to that triple dog dare. Hang on. Are you ready? But David is not a coward. David answered, "You're coming against me with a sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord, Almighty God, of the Israelite armies, which you defied. This very day the Lord will put you in my power. I will defeat you and cut off your head. And I will give the bodies of the Philistine soldiers to the birds and animals to eat. Then the whole world will know that Israel has a God, and everyone here will see the Lord does not need swords or spears to save his people. He is victorious in battle and will put all of you in our power." So David says, I'm going to kill you, and put your whole army is not going to get buried. So he's taking the insult and raising it up a lot. Goliath started walking quickly to David, and David ran quickly toward the Philistine battle line to fight him. He reached into his bag, took out a stone which he slung at Goliath. It hit him on the forehead and broke his skull, and Goliath fell down face forward, downward on the ground. And so, without a sword, David defeated and killed Goliath with a sling and a stone. Okay, you ready for the next part? This is the part that's not in the children's Bible. Are you ready? He ran to him, stood over him, took Goliath's sword out of its sheath, took Goliath's own sword, cut off his head, and killed him. Yes, that escalated very quickly. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they ran away. The men of Israel and Judah shouted and ran after him, pursuing him all the way to Gath and the gates of Ekron. The Philistines fell wounded along the road that leads to Saffron as far as Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites came back from pursuing the Philistines, they looted their camp. David got Goliath's head and took it to Jerusalem. So he's like carrying around Goliath's head right now, because that was something that they did. Right? I'm telling you, this is not in your children's Bible, but I can't make this stuff up.
That's probably the reason why.
There is a reason why. But he kept Goliath's weapons in his own tent. So that is the story of David and Goliath. So picture it. David shows up at camp just to bring food because his dad made him. Do you think he probably went like whining because his dad made him bring food to his brothers? He gets there, his brother's like, "Go away, you little pain, get out." David's like trying to hang with their friends. They're having none of it. Then David says, "Well, wait a minute, why are we all afraid of that guy if God's on our side?" And everybody else is like, "Shh. We're afraid of him, little one, because he's giant and he'll kill us." And what David says is, not if God's with us. Not if God is with us. So he goes out there, bravely. Kinda, there's a lot of faith and trust happening there, in God. He goes out. So you all knew the slingshot part, right?
Yeah.
But the head cutting off part, different edition. If you have younger brothers and sisters, don't share that part with them yet. Let them stick with the sword, with the stone. Let them stick with that for right now. It's not that it's fake, but it is. There's a reason we don't tell children that part. Fair enough?
What is?
Save it for.
What is the reason?
The reason is that they're not ready. It's kind of grotesque and violent.
Yeah, very violent.
It's very violent. Yes.
Why does he have carry around the head?
Why does he carry around the head? That was something that he did during that time to show that they had defeated somebody. And remember, this is again a time before news stories were out all the time. So you needed almost a visual proof. Please stop. It's just what armies did. It was part of the culture and tradition. Yes.
Don't dead bodies over time?
Well, yeah, he doesn't carry it for forever.
Yeah, that'd be.
Did he have the helmet on?
I don't know if the helmet was on or off when he cut off the head.
Yeah.
But the other added insult was that he cut off Goliath's head using Goliath's own sword. That's there's a lot of insulting going on in this book.
Wow.
In this little story. A lot of insulting going on. And that is why this is my favorite one to tell to 5th graders, because I know you guys are all very familiar with it, but I like the different ending. So, today, you have 2 slides that you're making. The first, I forget what number we're on, is Samuel.
We're on 11.
Number 11, okay. The first is Samuel. Don't start yet. Bible verse, pay attention. I wrote the number 1 in front of Samuel because there are 2 books of Samuel and you need to know which book you're looking in. Everybody's iPad should still be down and flipped. Chapter 3, verse 1 through 18. And this is Samuel hears God speak and obeys God. So the number 12, my personal favorite, is David. David is again 1 Samuel chapter 16 verses 1 through 13, and those verses talk about how David is anointed by Samuel. Now, this is really important. Anointing by God means you're chosen by God. It's a big deal to be anointed. Being anointed is a very important thing. Fair? All right, Dante, we're going to cut. You guys are going to make your video slides.